Alright, so a little bit of carving action here. This is one of the big chunks that will eventually look a little more like that. A little bit different because I don't have any black paint. This is from last year or a couple years ago. So I just wanted to kind of show you how I go about carving the stone into the big white, thick white foam. This actually works really good for the stone carving stuff. You get a little bit more of a, I don't know, earthy quality, whereas like the pink foam you get a really like, I don't know, more architectural quality. So both of them are really cool. It lends a different quality, I guess, to your building. So what I'm going to be doing is this more formed stone will be on the top of the panels, and then this will be the bottom of the panels. So yeah, essentially I'm going for just kind of a chunky stone look, and then this is going to be the edge that it butts up to the archway. So for that I'm going for more of that brick look. So I stenciled in like 8x3, some actual bricks there. You can see all the way up the edge for a little bit of realism in architecture. And then the rest of it, I just kind of go in and it's really hodgepodge. There's not a whole lot of logic that goes into it on my end anyway. I'm sure they had a lot more logic back in the day when they actually did this. But for my purposes, it's all kind of just giving it texture and variety and having some fun with it. Then soldering iron. I'll come back in and actually hit my edges. So I'll go around and trace all of the stones this way just to get my groove started like that. And once again, sorry, I suck at handheld camera stuff. I'll leave, you can see like right here, I'll leave chunks like that. The beauty of the white foam is that you can come back in with your fingers and it's really easy to pick these bigger spots out. So I'll get the line started for myself. Like here you can see I went around the stones, and then I'll come back in and just kind of pinch that stuff out, which also gives it, I think, a lot cooler texture, because this would have been pretty chunky in between here, that stuff. So, but it's really hard to go through and do the whole, you know, like you can see, it's hard to do the whole stone like that. So this does a really good job of kind of getting the line started for you. Like that. And you can even do a lot of it just with the soldering iron because it melts it down. Like that. And then come back in and just carve out this extra stuff. This is a 2-inch thick foam, which allows me to do a little bit more with depth. This foam was a 1-inch thick, so I didn't have quite as much to play with there. I had to keep it a little bit more shallow, but I got a pretty good mortar grout line there. With this stuff, you can see I can actually go pretty far. So yeah, and then after I do that process, I'll show you here in a bit, but I'll come back in and once I've carved out all of these grooves, I'll come back in with sandpaper and hit all the edges. So you can see like on here how all the actual edges of the stone aren't super precise anymore. And then I'll do the same on top of the stone, like just kind of rough it up and hit it with the sandpaper. Like I said, the cool thing about the white foam is it's a little bit easier to just kind of, you can use sandpaper to get texture like that. You don't really want to, I haven't tried it because I'm not brave enough, but the spray paint really eats through the white foam a little bit more than it does with the pink foam. So the way that I got that cool texture on the pink foam isn't going to work as well with this stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and use the sandpaper technique, and honestly it works pretty darn good for this. So yeah. Okay, so next step in carving. So as you can see, I got all of my big shapes soldered out. I picked out the kind of centerpieces there. I always use a straight edge on the stuff that I want to be more precise, because it is hard, even if you've drawn a straight line, it is hard to keep it straight when you're using the soldering iron. I usually use like that board right there, because if you use a level, you'll melt it. I have. So next step, I go through and try to even out, so you'll see like right there, you can see how it's a pretty sharp line along the edge. I just take some sandpaper and use it to make it more like this. So I'm using a pretty, I can't remember what grit it is, but it's pretty scratchy. Trying to use like a light one, it doesn't really work super well. And I'll just go around and literally hit all of my edges. Obviously, because it's stone, leave some of them a little bit more. Some of them you can make it look a little bit more crumbly. I'll use this to make the grout lines a little bit bigger. So like where you can see like right there, that one's still pretty small. I'll go in and you can really open up that grout line there. Mortar line, whatever. That's why I do this with foam and not real stone. I don't have to know the terms. And I'll use it to get some good texture on top of the stone too, to make them not so even. So yeah, the goal of this whole purpose is to make them look like individual stones, not like one big giant sheet of foam. So you can see like how that one's starting to get some good depth there. And it's starting to look like that's actually a stone that's been placed rather than carved out of one solid piece. So that's what we're going for. I like to around the edges, so like these chunks that would have fallen out, you can almost use the sandpaper like a saw with the white foam, and I'll break out that groove, because that to me is where it would have really chipped off, where that stone kind of broke apart. Like I said earlier, we're sort of trying to just use a bunch of scrap stuff this year. We're trying not to spend very much money. So that's why a lot of the pieces are really irregularly shaped. It's all just kind of what I had left over, and I've broken it up to cover. I'm doing the equivalent of like 4 wall panels. That sheet was actually, the big circle was cut out because we got a inflatable hot tub as a gift, and we had put pink foam under it at the beginning, like in the spring, and so I had this perfect arch shape, and I was like, well, hell, let's use that. I got a nice arched doorway, so that saved me a lot of time. So yeah, anyway, back to this. Yeah, just keep working on it and keep kind of carving away. I mean, these are stones that would definitely have not been perfect, so you can really kind of make them beat up and chunky. And the sandpaper on the white foam just works great for this purpose. So, and the more texture you have on the top of these stones, like you can see on that one down there, the more you're gonna get variation in the color, like when you're painting and when you dry brush. You can see it there too. See how I've really kind of scratched up the surfaces of those. If I would have left those smooth, you wouldn't get any of that. You'd just get a really uniform color. So depending on what you're going for, if you're going for a really uniform color, then you don't have to put the scratches in. But if you want to give it kind of that depth, adding that scratching on the surface definitely helps. So Okay, so now we are painting the big chunky stone with the bricky parts. Yes, that is the technical terminology. So over here is kind of the finished, a little bit more of a finished piece. So you can see we did the brown base coat on everything. Filled in all the grout lines with that brown base coat. And then I've been going over it with this color. It's kind of a beigey. Again, using what we got. My mom is a pro at rating the bargain paint bins, so I found this one. We got it. I'm using it. I'm trying to give this brick look like it's a little bit lighter than the rest of the stone. More of like a limestoney brick kind of thing. I did get brave enough actually to hit it with some spray paint, and you could see where it ate in, and that was actually after several coats of paint. So definitely be careful if you hit the white foam with spray paint. I actually really like what it did because I'm going for lighter stones there. So it worked out in my favor. But yeah, I'm just gonna show you. Essentially what I do is I take that light tan. I'm gonna get a little bit of paint on the brush, not a ton. This is kind of dry brushing, but a little bit thicker application. And then I come back in, and rather than really getting down in the grooves, I'm just gonna go over kind of the top. And this is meant to be kind of uneven. It's not meant to be perfect. And then when I get to the brick parts, I'm gonna do it a little thicker because I want those to actually, I want the tan to be the primary color of those. So I'll come back in here and do it a little thicker. I've been doing the same treatment on the bricks here as I did on the other stone chunks, where I'm coming back in with that stone spray paint. That's the spray paint that I used on it. And then going back over it with that kind of yellowy color. You can see how it's got a bit of a yellow to it that the rest don't. And then I come back in with just a little brush. I really like the little angled foam brushes, or a little 1-inch brush, and I love doing this stuff, this kind of drippy, gross, dirty, especially if you've got holes, because you would have water that pooled in there and dripped down, and where it cracks and stuff. So that's kind of my favorite part. I don't know why, it just always makes it look really cool. So yeah, that's about it. This one's actually pretty easy, you know, just the dark brown and then the beige on top. I've been going back through and kind of modeling in some black, like you can see right there, and over there. I didn't have enough black to do the black base coat, and I didn't want to use the spray paint like I did on the other foam. So like last year's, you can see a lot more black in them, but I figured these buildings would have had a lot of different kinds of stone, so I'm rolling with it. All right, that's just about everything.